We live in a world where love is often presented to us as the ultimate goal. From the stories we are told as children to the societal norms that guide our adult lives, love is painted as something we must find, possess, and hold on to at all costs. But have you ever stopped to ask what love really is? And how much of what we call love is shaped by the expectations of the society we live in? We are told what love should look like, what it should feel like, and how it should feel like, and how it should fit neatly into the framework of our lives. But is this truth, or is it an illusion? Buddha once taught that attachment is the root of suffering. And isn't it true that much of what we label as love is nothing more than attachment? We cling to people, to relationships, to the idea of being loved, because we believe these things will complete us. We chase the feeling of validation, the comfort of belonging, and the reassurance of being wanted. Yet, when we look honestly at ourselves, how often does this clinging lead to pain? The fear of losing someone, the anxiety of not being enough, the resentment when our love is not returned in the way we expect. Can something that brings so much suffering truly be called love? Society tells us that to love is to possess. To claim someone as ours, we hear phrases like "you're mine" or "my other half," as if another person's existence is meant to fill the void within us. But isn't this a dangerous illusion? When we place the weight of our happiness on someone else, aren't we setting ourselves up for disappointment? People are not unchanging. They grow, they falter, they leave. And when they do, where does that leave us? Broken, empty, abandoned. The truth is, the love society glorifies is not love at all. It's a transaction. I give you my affection, my loyalty, and in return, you give me your validation, your presence, your promise to stay. But is this love, or is it a contract built on fear? Now let's go deeper. If love is not possession, if it is not the clinging attachment society glorifies, then what is it? Buddha teaches us that true love is rooted in understanding and compassion. It is not about what we can get from another person, but what we can give without expectation. It is about seeing someone as they are, not as we want them to be. But how often do we do this? How often do we truly see the people we claim to love? Or do we simply project our desires onto them, molding them into the image of what we think will make us happy?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
This brings us to an uncomfortable truth. Much of what we call love is not about the other person at all. It's about us. It's about our needs, our insecurities, our longing to feel whole. We don't love people for who they are, we love them for what they represent to us. And when they fail to meet our expectations, we withdraw our love as if it were some conditional gift. But is this fair? More importantly, is this real? Can love exist where there is expectation? Let's challenge ourselves here. If love is not about possession, not about meeting our own needs, then what is its purpose? Why do we love at all? Buddha would argue that love, in its truest form, is the recognition of our shared humanity. It is the ability to see another person's suffering and joy as deeply intertwined with our own. It is not about what we can take from them, but how we can alleviate their burdens, even at the cost of our own comfort. But ask yourself this: how many of us love this way? How many of us are willing to give without taking, to love without expecting, to care without controlling? The truth society won't tell you is that real love is not glamorous. It's not the fairy tale we've been sold. It's messy, uncomfortable, and often requires sacrificing our own ego. It demands that we confront our own flaws, our own selfishness, and our own fears. It asks us to let go of our need to control, to possess, to demand. And this is terrifying, isn't it? Because to love this way means to be vulnerable. It means to open ourselves up to the possibility of loss, of rejection, of pain. But isn't this the only way love can be real? If it is not given freely, without fear, without expectation, is it truly love? Here's a question for you when you say I love you to someone. What do you really mean? Are you saying, I see you, I accept you, and I wish for your happiness, even if it doesn't include me? Or are you saying, I need you, I want you, and I expect you to make me happy? Be honest with yourself. The answer might surprise you. If we are to understand love, we must first understand ourselves. We must confront the ways in which our desires, our insecurities, and our societal conditioning distort our ability to love freely. And this is not easy. It requires brutal honesty, a willingness to let go of our illusions, and the courage to face the truth about who we are. Are you ready for that? The irony is that society which claims to celebrate love often does the most to corrupt it. We are bombarded with images of what love should look like: perfect, effortless, eternal. But this is a lie. Love is not perfect. It is not effortless. And it is certainly not eternal in the way society portrays it. People change. Relationships end. And clinging to the idea that love should last forever only sets us up for heartbreak. Real love does not seek permanence. It does not cling. It does not demand. It flows freely, like a river, adapting to the changing landscape of our lives. But can we let go of our need for control long enough to experience this kind of love? I want you to sit with that for a moment. What would it mean to love without clinging, without expecting, without controlling? What would it mean to love someone not for what they can give you, but simply for who they are? And are you brave enough to love this way? If we are to understand why our love so often falters, why it hurts, and why it leaves us feeling empty, we must confront the role of the ego. The ego is a cunning force within us, and its influence over our understanding of love is profound. It whispers to us that love is about fulfillment, a means to fill the void within ourselves. It tells us that love is about being wanted, being admired, being needed. But the ego is a master of illusions, and when we allow it to guide our relationships, it sabotages the very thing we are trying to nurture. Think about the last time you felt jealousy in love. Where did that feeling come from? Was it truly about the other person, or was it about your fear of losing what you believed was yours? Jealousy is the ego's reaction to the threat of losing control. When we are jealous, we are not focused on the well-being of the person we claim to love. We are focused on our own insecurity, our own fear of rejection, our own sense of inadequacy. Can love and jealousy truly coexist? If love is selfless, how can it thrive in the presence of a force so deeply rooted in self-interest? The ego doesn't stop at jealousy. It manifests in countless other ways: pride, possessiveness, the need to be right. How often do we find ourselves arguing with someone we love, not because we truly disagree, but because the ego demands we assert our dominance? How often do we withhold affection or attention as a way of punishing our partner for not meeting our expectations? These are not acts of love, they are the ego's attempts to maintain control. And in doing so, the ego slowly erodes the foundation of the relationship. Buddha taught that suffering arises when we cling to the illusion of self. And isn't this what the ego does? It convinces us that we are separate from the people we love, that their actions are a reflection of our worth, that their failures are an affront to our identity. But this is a lie. When we truly love someone, the boundaries between self and other dissolve. Their happiness becomes our happiness. Their pain becomes our pain. There is no room for the ego in real love, because real love is the recognition of our shared humanity. It is the understanding that we are not separate, but deeply interconnected. Let's go deeper. Have you ever noticed how much of our love is conditional? We say things like, I will love you if you change, or I will love you as long as you meet my needs. But is this love, or is it manipulation? The ego loves conditions because they allow it to maintain control. By attaching conditions to our love, we place ourselves in a position of power. We become the arbiter of whether someone is worthy of our affection. But in doing so, we strip love of its authenticity. True love cannot be conditional, because conditions are rooted in the ego's need to protect itself. Real love is unconditional. It says, I love you not because of what you do, but simply because you are. But here's the challenge: how do we let go of the ego in love? How do we free ourselves from the need to control, to possess, to demand? The first step is awareness. We must become aware of the ways in which the ego operates in our relationships. This requires brutal honesty. It requires us to confront the uncomfortable truth about our own behavior. Are we loving selflessly, or are we using love as a tool to feed our ego? Are we giving, or are we taking? Are we truly seeing the other person, or are we only seeing the reflection of our own desires? Once we are aware of the ego's influence, we can begin to dismantle it. This is not easy. The ego will fight back. It will tell us that we are justified in our jealousy, our pride, our need for control. It will convince us that letting go of these things is a sign of weakness. But this is another of the ego's lies. Letting go of the ego is not weakness, it is the ultimate strength. It takes courage to love without expectation, to give without demanding, to care without controlling. But this is the only way love can be real. Here's a question for you. When was the last time you loved someone without expecting anything in return? Not even their love, not even their gratitude. Can you imagine loving someone so purely that their happiness is enough, even if it costs you your own? This is the kind of love Buddha speaks of. It is not the love society glorifies, because it does not serve the ego. But it is the only love that is truly free. The ego also distorts our understanding of love by convincing us that it is something we must receive, rather than something we must give. How often do we hear people say, I'm looking for someone to love me? But isn't this backwards? If love is about giving, not taking, then shouldn't we be asking, how can I love others more deeply? Society encourages us to focus on what we can get from love: validation, security, pleasure. But Buddha reminds us that the true purpose of love is not to receive these things, but to give them. And in giving, we find that we are already whole. Let's address another uncomfortable truth. The ego thrives on the illusion of permanence. It convinces us that love should last forever, that relationships should never change, that people should always remain the same. But life is impermanent. People grow, relationships evolve, and when we cling to the idea of permanence, we set ourselves up for suffering. Real love does not seek to hold on. It does not demand that things remain the same. It embraces impermanence, understanding that love is not about possessing someone forever, but about cherishing them in the present moment. Ask yourself this: are you willing to let go of the need for permanence in love? Are you willing to love someone even if you know they may leave, even if you know they may change? This is the ultimate test of love. The ego cannot survive in the face of impermanence because it relies on the illusion of control. But when we let go of the ego, we free ourselves to love deeply, authentically, and without fear. The ego also blinds us to the fact that love is not limited. It convinces us that love is a finite resource, something we must hoard and protect. But this is another illusion. Love is infinite. The more we give, the more we have. The more we open our hearts, the more we realize that love is not something we possess, but something we are. And when we let go of the ego's fear of scarcity, we discover that we are capable of loving not just one person, but all beings. So here's the final question for now. If you were to strip away all the illusions of the ego, the jealousy, the pride, the need for control, what would your love look like? Would it be freer? Would it be deeper? Would it be more real? And are you brave enough to love this way? If we peel back the layers of the ego, what lies beneath is something far more fragile: fear. Fear is the silent force that keeps us from experiencing love in its purest form. It whispers to us that to love is to expose ourselves, to risk being hurt, to hand someone the power to wound us in ways we might never recover from. This fear is deeply ingrained in us, and it's no wonder we resist real love. To love fully, to love truly, is to be vulnerable. And vulnerability is terrifying, isn't it? Think about the walls we build around ourselves. From childhood, we learn to protect our hearts, to shield ourselves from rejection, betrayal, and the agony of loss. It's a survival mechanism, one that society reinforces at every turn. We are told to be strong, to hide our emotions, to never let anyone see our weakness. But have you ever stopped to wonder, if we are so busy protecting ourselves, how can we ever let anyone in? How can we truly love if we are constantly guarding against the possibility of pain? We live in a culture that equates vulnerability with weakness. But isn't vulnerability the ultimate act of courage? To love is to risk everything. It is to say, here I am, fully exposed, with all my flaws, my fears, my insecurities. I give you my heart, knowing you could break it. This is not weakness, this is strength. It takes far more courage to open ourselves to love than it does to close ourselves off from it. But how many of us are willing to take that risk? Let's be honest with ourselves. How often do we hold back in love because we are afraid of being hurt? How often do we hide parts of ourselves, fearing that if the other person truly saw us, they might not love us anymore? This fear is the greatest barrier to real love. It keeps us from being authentic, from being seen, from being known. And if we cannot be seen or known, how can we ever be truly loved? The love we receive will always feel hollow, because deep down we know it is not us they are loving, it is the mask we wear. Buddha teaches us that suffering arises from attachment. But isn't it also true that suffering arises from avoidance? When we avoid vulnerability, when we avoid the possibility of pain, we also avoid the possibility of joy. We numb ourselves thinking we are protecting ourselves, but in doing so, we shut ourselves off from the very thing that makes life meaningful. Love cannot exist without vulnerability. It cannot exist without the willingness to take the risk. So the question becomes, are you willing to risk it? Are you willing to embrace the uncertainty, the impermanence, the possibility of pain in order to experience real love? Let's take a moment to explore why vulnerability feels so dangerous. At its core, it is the fear of rejection. We are terrified that if we reveal our true selves, we will not be enough, not good enough, not attractive enough, not worthy enough. This fear is universal. It is the human condition. But here's the paradox: the very thing we fear being seen and rejected is also the thing we most deeply crave. We want to be seen. We want to be loved for who we truly are. But how can we ever experience this if we are too afraid to show ourselves? Society does not make this any easier. We live in a world that glorifies perfection. We are bombarded with images of what we should look like, how we should act, who we should be in order to be lovable. We internalize these messages, and they become the standards by which we judge ourselves. But here's the truth society won't tell you: love is not about perfection. It is not about being flawless. Love is about accepting and being accepted, flaws and all. The cracks in us are not something to hide, they are where the light gets in. But can you believe this? Can you believe that you are worthy of love not despite your imperfections, but because of them? The fear of vulnerability also stems from our fear of loss. To love is to open ourselves to the possibility of losing the person we love. This is inevitable. Whether through separation, change, or death, every love story will one day end. And this terrifies us. We cling to people, trying to hold on to them, trying to make them stay, because the thought of losing them is unbearable. But in doing so, we suffocate love itself. True love does not cling. It does not seek to possess. It embraces the impermanence of life, understanding that love is not about holding on, but about being fully present in the moments we have together. Can you love someone this way? Can you love them knowing they may leave, knowing they may change, knowing they may one day be gone? Let's go deeper. What would it mean to love without fear? What would it mean to let go of your need for certainty, for control, for guarantees? The truth is, love is not safe. It is not predictable. It is not something you can control. And this is why it is so powerful. Love forces us to confront our fears, our insecurities, our deepest vulnerabilities. It strips us of our illusions and shows us who we really are. And this is why so many of us resist it. We are not afraid of love itself, we are afraid of what love will reveal about us. But here's the irony, the very thing we fear being vulnerable is the thing that makes love possible. Without vulnerability, there can be no intimacy, no connection, no trust. Vulnerability is the bridge between two hearts, the space where love is born. And while it may feel like a risk, it is also the greatest gift we can give. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, we are saying to the other person, I trust you with my heart. I trust you with my truth. I trust you with my pain, and in doing so, we create the conditions for real love to flourish. Ask yourself this: what are you afraid of losing? Your pride? Your sense of control? Your illusion of invulnerability? And is holding on to these things worth the cost of never truly loving or being loved? The walls you build to protect yourself may keep pain out, but they will also keep love out. Are you willing to tear them down? Buddha reminds us that fear is an illusion. It is the mind's way of clinging to what is familiar, even if it no longer serves us. And while vulnerability may feel like a threat, it is actually the pathway to freedom. When we embrace vulnerability, we free ourselves from the chains of fear. We allow ourselves to love and be loved, not because it is safe, but because it is real. And isn't that what we all want? To experience a love that is real, even if it means risking everything. So here's the challenge: can you love someone without armor? Can you show them your scars, your fears, your insecurities, and trust that they will love you anyway? And if they don't, can you still find the strength to love yourself? This is the ultimate act of courage. This is the truth about love society won't tell you. Love is not about perfection or certainty or guarantees. Love is about vulnerability. And it is only when we embrace this truth that we can experience the depth and beauty of real love.